The human advantage. There's something uniquely satisfying about being the tallest person in any room, but it's a completely different thing when you're the tallest on an entire alien planet. I'd spent my life as the big guy, always taller than everyone, whether in line at the grocery store, at school, or even on missions with other species. But now, stepping into the bustling heart of an alien market on a distant planet, I was feeling the kind of advantage that I never expected to have. I could reach things no one else could. The rest of the crew was made up of all kinds of species, each with their own strengths. Mur, my trusty tentacled partner, was nearly half my height, his slender arms perfect for delicate tasks, but not great for lifting anything heavy. Paint, with her leathery green scales, was tall for her kind, but still only barely up to my chest, which made her a bit clumsy when trying to handle the larger, bulkier objects. And then there was me, 6 feet 6 inches of humanoid height and muscle. Not exactly towering compared to the giants I'd heard about, but tall enough that no one here could do anything without me. The cargo we were meant to pick up wasn't exactly the most glamorous task. It wasn't like we were ferrying precious artifacts or rare resources. No, we were hauling odd junk from one old farmer's storage barn to another location. A simple task, but one with a twist. The items we were collecting had been carefully packed and stacked on shelves that were ridiculously high. So high that they made me feel like I was walking through an abstract art piece where nothing seemed to make sense. The shelves were filled with strange alien equipment, containers, and crates. The market was a relic of sorts, an ancient warehouse repurposed into a trade hub, yet still barely functional. I bent down and grabbed the first crate, dusty, worn, but sturdy. Mur checked his communicator again, one of his tentacles flicking over the list of items we had to collect. "That's everything from this alcove," he confirmed, his voice modulated by the device. I placed the crate carefully on the hover sled. The rest of the market was bustling with activity, some aliens haggling for items, others browsing the shelves. But there was no time for that. We had a job to do. "What's next?" I asked, eager to keep the momentum going. Mur glanced at the list and then scanned the ceiling of the barn. "Next is the blue alcove." The entire place was a maze of mismatched architecture. The walls were curved and bent in odd shapes, with nothing really aligning perfectly. Everything looked like it had been thrown together over time, a mixture of old and new with no regard for traditional design. It was hard to tell where one section ended and the other began, but I could make out shapes and alcoves scattered throughout. "The round alcove, right?" I asked, thinking I had finally spotted it among the sea of shelves and crates. Mur flicked his tentacles, confirming the query with a nod. "Exactly." I spun around, searching for anything that resembled a round alcove in this sea of geometric chaos. The place was filled with items I couldn't even identify. Things that defied all logic and reason. It was a bit overwhelming at first, but then my gaze fell on a curved arch halfway up the wall. "That's more of an oval," I muttered to myself, but it would have to do. There weren't exactly a lot of options, and we had to keep moving. "I see it. Paint." The scaled humanoid called out. Her hand shot up, pointing toward the arch. She was always quick to find things. Sometimes it seemed like her eyes were more suited for scanning than mine. "All right," I said, shifting the hover sled into position. "Let's get it done." The work was monotonous at first, picking up strange items that I couldn't begin to understand. There were metallic objects, bundles of cables, and what looked like hollow spheres, all stored together in varying states of disrepair. Still, we needed to get everything off the shelves and onto the sled, so we could ship it all to the next location. The issue wasn't just the awkwardness of the items. It was the fact that the shelves were stacked so high that I had to stand on tiptoe just to reach them. I could see why we'd been hired for this job. The farmer had probably set the items so high on purpose. There was no way the smaller species could get them down without assistance. I reached up and grabbed what seemed like an entire set of tools, welded together in a way I'd never seen before. They were heavy, and my arms strained under the weight. Still, it wasn't nearly as difficult for me as it was for the others. I carefully placed them on the hover sled, hearing the familiar hum of the engine as it carried the load. I glanced over at Paint. Next batch. She nodded, looking a little winded, though her face remained as calm as ever. All yours. Just as I turned to grab the next bundle of equipment, I noticed Paint giving me a look that said she wasn't happy with something. I turned my head and saw her standing beside a decrepit ladder. The rungs had been chewed through by time and misuse, and one of the wooden legs had snapped when Paint had tried to use it. That ladder is definitely not gonna help, Paint muttered under her breath. She looked guilty, but I could hardly blame her. There wasn't much to work with here. I gave a heavy sigh and surveyed the area. All right, what else do we have? I scanned the surroundings, trying to find something that would work. My mind raced through a list of possibilities. It wasn't as if I couldn't climb to the top. I was tall enough and strong enough. But it wasn't worth risking a fall or damaging anything further. There's gotta be something, I muttered to myself. I turned back to Mur, who was happily studying his communicator, seemingly unconcerned by the dilemma. Well, there's always the hover sled, Mur suggested, without even looking up. But I wouldn't trust the brakes. Not a chance, I agreed, rolling my eyes. Too risky. We kept scanning, and Paint eventually trotted back over, looking up at a stack of heavy metallic tubs stacked in the corner. They looked like they had seen better days, but one of them was solid enough to serve as a makeshift stepping stool. Not perfect, but it would work. I dragged the heavy tub over, my arms sore from the exertion of lifting things all day. As I positioned it near the alcove, Paint gave me an approving nod. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough to allow me to reach the higher shelves. But just as I got everything into position, I heard a voice call out from behind me. What's taking so long? The unlikely problem solver. As I shifted the heavy metal tub into place, I noticed something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a soft click, followed by the faint rumble of machinery, a distant sound, but unmistakable. Did you hear that? I asked, turning toward Mur, who was still absorbed in his communicator. He didn't even look up as he flicked through his list, his tentacles moving quickly to scroll. Mur. Nim? Yeah, I hear it, he said distractedly. I'm sure it's just the station's power grid stabilizing. It's old tech, you know. Could be, I muttered, but something in my gut told me it wasn't just a random noise. In space, things had a way of malfunctioning when you least expected it. I'd been in more than one situation where just a minor issue turned into a catastrophe. Paint glanced up from where she was organizing a collection of mismatched crates. What's the matter? She asked, noting the sudden tension in the air. I don't know yet, I replied, looking back to the massive warehouse. The walls were made of a thick industrial material, but with the odd curved architecture of alien design, it almost looked like a labyrinth of overlapping tunnels. Every once in a while, I could hear an ominous creak or groan from the structure, but we were used to that in space stations. Nothing unusual so far. Maybe it's just the place settling. Old buildings, huh? She said, but her tone didn't entirely convince me. It was clear she didn't believe it either. Before I could respond, there was a loud thud from deeper in the warehouse, followed by a soft crash. It sounded like something had fallen, but it didn't feel like the kind of harmless accident we had been dealing with. Mur. I snapped. Check the structural integrity of this place. I don't like how this feels. Mur's tentacles froze mid-scroll, and his usually laid-back demeanor shifted to a more focused one. His eyes flickered over his communicator. Hold on, I'll get the feed, he said quickly. A few seconds later, the small device in his tentacle buzzed, and a map of the station appeared. Nothing alarming, he said, but his voice was tinged with uncertainty. Maybe just a faulty piece of equipment, or the wind moving the walls. You know how these old places are. I wasn't convinced, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. The noise was getting worse, louder. And then, another crack, this one unmistakably coming from directly above us. Didn't feel like wind, I muttered, narrowing my eyes. Something was off, and I was getting the feeling we weren't alone. A new complication. Just as I was about to order everyone to be on alert, I heard a voice echo down the corridor from the far end of the warehouse. "You're taking too long." The voice wasn't hostile, but it carried the weight of authority. A tone you don't want to hear when you're in the middle of a foreign planet, working with alien tech and dealing with unpredictable circumstances. I looked over to Paint, who had stopped moving. Her eyes narrowed, her body language signaling caution. Mur, sensing the shift in atmosphere, pulled his communicator closer, fingers dancing over the screen, accessing the station's security footage. Then I saw it. Something strange was moving through the shadows near the back of the warehouse. I could make out the silhouette of a tall, elongated form with glowing eyes, flickering as though it were adjusting to the dim light. The figure didn't move like the other aliens on the crew. Its movements were deliberate, too smooth, too calculated. "Who's that?" Paint whispered, her voice barely audible. I wasn't sure if she was asking me or herself, but I knew we needed answers. "We should get the rest of the crates finished," I suggested, trying to keep my cool, but the hair on the back of my neck was standing on end now. Whatever was coming towards us wasn't just another worker or delivery person. We weren't here alone. Just then, the figure in the shadows moved into the light. I froze. The creature before us was a towering insectoid being, its exoskeleton dark, with silver markings that shimmered under the dim warehouse lights. Its mandibles clicked sharply, and its many limbs shifted restlessly. It wasn't just the size or appearance that made my blood run cold, it was the sheer menace it radiated. "Trouble." Mur's voice was dry, his eyes still locked on the alien. "I don't know," I answered, stepping forward to place myself between the alien and my team. "But I have a feeling we're about to find out." A dangerous encounter. The insectoid alien stalked closer, its eyes locking onto mine. It didn't speak for several seconds, just studied me, as if trying to measure the threat I posed. Its limbs clicked as it moved, creating an eerie rhythm, almost hypnotic. I kept my posture firm, but I knew the second this creature made a move, we'd need to react quickly. "This area is restricted," the creature finally said, its voice strangely fluid despite its appearance. "You are trespassing. Leave now." I raised my hand slowly. "We're just here to pick up some goods. No harm intended. We're working for the farmer." The alien tilted its head, its mandibles clacking together thoughtfully. "The farmer has retired. I am now the caretaker of this space. You must leave." Something about its words set off an alarm in my mind. "Caretaker?" I asked, taking a slow step back. "What do you mean? What exactly are you guarding here?" The alien's glow intensified slightly as it seemed to evaluate my question. "I guard the legacy of this place. These are not mere relics you are moving. They are artifacts of great value." I exchanged a glance with Paint and Mur. The tone of the conversation was beginning to shift. "We were hired to move what we could find," I said cautiously. "But if there's something more important here, I think we need to discuss this further." The insectoid alien's demeanor changed in an instant, from passive to aggressive. It hissed, its mandibles snapping shut with a metallic sound. "You think you control this place, human. You think your primitive species can simply take what you wish. You will leave now, or you will regret it." Shifting power. The alien's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for a moment, I felt the weight of its presence settle over the group. But we couldn't just walk away. Not after everything we'd gone through to get this cargo. This was more than just a misunderstanding now. This was a confrontation. I stepped forward, ready for whatever came next, but Mur quickly reached out, grabbing my arm. "Wait," he whispered urgently. "We don't know enough about what's here. Let me try something." Without waiting for my consent, Mur extended his tentacles toward the alien's communicator, which it had been using to scan the area. In an instant, Mur hacked into the device. The alien made a low growling noise but didn't react. Mur continued to tap into the system, his tentacles working with a precision I admired. After a tense moment, Mur's eyes widened. "There's more going on here than just cargo, Captain. This place is loaded with military-grade tech." I felt my heart skip a beat. This wasn't just a market. This was a weapons cache, a hidden arsenal beneath a facade of junk, secrets beneath the surface. The alien's cold, calculating stare pierced through me as the silence between us stretched. My instincts screamed that this was no longer about a simple cargo job. The words military-grade tech echoed in my mind, making my stomach twist. I had seen my fair share of dangerous situations in the galaxy, but this felt different. We were standing on the precipice of something much larger than a simple misunderstanding. Mur's tentacles trembled slightly as he kept his focus on the alien's communicator. His usual calm demeanor was rattled by the discovery. "Captain," he whispered, almost urgently, "this is not just a market anymore. These goods aren't junk. They're part of something bigger." I glanced at Paint, who had positioned herself to my right. Her hands were tight around her blaster, her body tense, prepared for anything. Her eyes met mine, a silent understanding passing between us. This wasn't just a miscommunication. It was a trap, or at the very least, a calculated move. We were standing in the midst of something we didn't yet fully understand. The alien creature, standing taller than any of us, tilted its head slightly. Its mandibles clicked with displeasure, and it took another step forward. "You should have left when I told you to. Now you've made a grave mistake." I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to reach for my own weapon. I knew this was a delicate situation. A single misstep could turn this into a fight we weren't ready for. The alien's presence was oppressive, its body language radiating an unspoken threat. But I wasn't one to back down, not when there was so much at stake. "What are you protecting here?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "These aren't just crates of old junk, are they? What's really going on?" For a moment, the alien hesitated. I could almost see the gears turning in its mind as it debated how much to reveal. The faint hum of the station's lights and distant noises in the warehouse created an eerie backdrop to the growing tension between us. Then the alien spoke again, its voice slightly lower but still filled with authority. "You don't understand," it said, its voice now almost a whisper, as if confiding in me. "These relics are ancient. They were forged by a species long gone, hidden away from prying eyes. They hold the power to reshape this world and the galaxy. You shouldn't have come here." I could feel the weight of its words settling over the group, but I wasn't about to back down without answers. "What kind of power?" I asked, pushing further. "And why hide them here, in a rundown warehouse full of junk?" The alien's mandibles twitched in frustration, but it didn't lash out. Instead, it looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and something else, reluctance perhaps. "The power to control entire fleets, the ability to manipulate energy in ways that are beyond your comprehension. These relics are weapons, and if they fall into the wrong hands, they could be used to destroy more than just planets. Entire civilizations could fall." Paint and Mur exchanged wary glances, their expressions grim. We had encountered dangerous tech before, things that were left behind by ancient, lost civilizations. But this sounded like something far more dangerous, something that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. If these artifacts were what the alien claimed, we had stumbled into something far darker than a simple cargo run. "Then why not destroy them?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Why keep them hidden here? Why not make sure they're out of the galaxy's reach?" The alien's eyes gleamed with an almost sadistic satisfaction. "Destroy them?" it repeated. "Oh no, the moment that technology is gone, the galaxy would forget its power. Someone else will find it, someone more ruthless. It is better to hide it away, to keep it safe until the time is right. And you," it gestured to me, its voice almost mocking now, air standing in the way of that. I swallowed hard. The implications of its words hit me like a ton of bricks. We weren't just dealing with ancient relics. These were weapons, potentially enough to change the entire course of galactic history, and we had unwittingly become part of something much larger than ourselves. How do we know you're not lying? Paint asked, her voice steady but laced with skepticism. How do we know this isn't just a trap to get us to help you move these weapons for your own gain? The alien remained silent for a moment, its eyes narrowing. You don't. But it doesn't matter. You are already involved. Once you walked into this warehouse, you became part of the story. The gravity of the situation hit me fully then. We weren't just innocent bystanders anymore. Our involvement in moving these crates had drawn us into something bigger. Much bigger. I turned to Mur. What do you have on that communicator? I asked, my voice urgent now. Mur's tentacles twitched as he worked quickly, typing in commands. His face remained focused, his mind clearly racing. Trying to access some of the files related to these items, Mur replied quickly. Hold on. Here we go. I'm in. He paused, his eyes scanning the data that began to appear on his screen. This station isn't just a storage facility. It's a research hub. The items here were cataloged, and there are records of weapons tests. The power these artifacts hold, it's not theoretical. It's real. I felt a knot form in my stomach. We had unknowingly walked into a war zone, a place where ancient, dangerous technology had been hidden for a reason. And now, it seemed we were part of a much larger conflict, one that could shape the future of the galaxy. The alien's tone changed again, softer this time. You cannot take these artifacts. You cannot deliver them. They were never meant for you. You don't know what you are dealing with. But we're here now, I said, my voice firm. And we're taking them. You'll have to stop us. The alien clicked its mandibles, a sharp metallic sound that echoed in the tense silence. Very well. If that is your choice, then you will regret it. In an instant, the alien's stance shifted. It reared back on its multiple legs, and I could see the glint of something dangerous in its eyes. It wasn't just threatening us with words anymore. It was preparing for something far worse.